The night began with a broken water glass and a promise no one had made out loud. A stem snapped, the bowl hit the tile, and the restaurant paused. That collective, breath-held second before everyone pretends nothing just happened. Iris Hale listened to the hush close again, like a door, and finished tying the red ribbon around the tarnished key in her apron. At 7:42 p.m., the revolving door parted for a man who preferred doors that knew him by name. He arrived late and loud, trailed by 2 assistants, and the scent of cold air and very expensive cologne. His coat was draped over an assistant's arms like a surrendered flag. His voice carried before he did. And then he was at the host stand, announcing rather than greeting. "I have the room," he said, without bothering to specify which. "Graham Voss." A ripple moved through the main dining room. Not admiration, so much as recognition. The way people notice distant thunder and quickly calculate how long before rain. Voss's face had visited enough magazine covers to be understood even upside down. He was the man who bought things other men had built, simplified them to the edge of cruelty, and sold the remainder at a price that made shareholders propose to their analysts. He had a reputation for generosity with charities and impatience with people who could not move a day to suit his schedule. The hostess, a college sophomore with lacquered nails the color of new cherries, glanced at the seating chart like it could grow an extra table on command. "Mr. Voss, we're honored. We have you at 14. "I don't sit at even numbers," he said flatly, and the assistant to his left made a small notation in his phone with a stylus that clicked like a metronome. "Make it 15. "Of course," the hostess said, managing a smile that winced at the edges. We'll move the 2 top by the column," Iris said gently, already shifting the silverware. 15 will be ready in 30 seconds. She didn't look up long enough to accept the hostess's grateful glance. Instead, she passed the red ribbon key from one hand to the other, a habit more than a need, and watched the way Voss scanned the room. Some men take inventory without seeming to. He seemed to. His eyes marked the exits, the bar, the private alcove with frosted glass, the chef's window, where plates rested for less than a breath. Iris saw the calculation there and placed it in the mental ledger she kept for the night. Entries, exits, numbers that wanted company. He sat at 15, with an entitlement so practiced it could have been mistaken for grace. His assistants arranged themselves like parentheses. The wine director arrived with a list. Voss did not touch it. "Bring the Corton Charlemagne," he said. "The good one." "We only carry," the wine director began. "The good one," Voss repeated, and the director nodded, not because he agreed, but because he knew how quickly you could be right and unemployed. Iris delivered water and menus with a calm that dulled the edges of the man's impatience. He didn't read the menu. He scanned prices the way a pilot scans altitudes, necessary for knowing where other people find their ceilings. A couple at 7 whispered. A table of 4 at 10 went theatrically deaf. Somewhere near the kitchen, a busser began stacking plates as if they could be lifted out of the evening one dish at a time. "Your specials tonight," Iris said, "are an age ribeye, 42 days on the bone, a winter fluke with charred lemon and fennel, and a roasted squash with—" "Stop," Voss said, holding up a palm. "Just bring me the ribeye. Medium well." The room exhaled its private judgment. Iris did not. "Yes, sir." "And make sure the chef knows who it's for," he added, not bothering to lower his voice. "I'm not here to be treated like everyone else." The irony of a man insisting on distinction while asking for meat cooked past feeling did not touch her face. Deadpan humor could be a private religion. Hers had many silent services. She collected their wine order with the same smoothness she used on tables that tipped in cash and apology. Troy, the floor manager, slid into her path near the door to the service alley. He had a gift for appearing as if conjured by the word problem, and a hairline that traced the exact curve of the lenses he wore on weekends when he took pictures of strangers' dogs and called it a hobby. "If he asks for anything, you say yes before you hear the question," Troy murmured, smiling in a way that showed molars rather than comfort. "I'll comp whatever. We need him happy." "We need everyone safe," Iris replied, not because there was danger, but because the word had a habit of arriving late if you didn't invite it early. Troy's smile narrowed. "We need him happy," he repeated, as if she had requested the definition of we. She nodded, then moved past him toward the point of sale, where orders become data that later pretend to be memory. On the screen, the modifiers for Table 15 rose like a building permit. Ribeye 16. Uz. M. Well. No butter. Sauce on side. The printer chirped. The ticket cut, ribboned, and dropped in a neat white tongue. Iris tore it free and felt the corner catch. A second stub clung where it shouldn't. An extra inch of paper with a line of text that didn't belong on a kitchen chit. SVC Gateway Fee 3.0%. Kestrel Solms LLC. She stared at it for half a breath. It was the kind of small mistake software makes when it wants to confess. The service gateway fee was supposed to remain invisible, rolled into the back-end totals where only managers and owners glance. Instead, some setting had slipped. The shell company had nudged daylight with its name. She tucked the stub under the edge of the POS like a moth pinned for later study and returned to the floor, where money was speaking and everyone tried to look bilingual. At 15, the wine director poured the Corton Charlemagne that was the good one, a bottle with a price that didn't start with a 4, but wished it did. The wine was pale gold, almost shy in the glass, and it moved toward Voss's mouth like it had appointments only he could keep. He didn't swirl. He didn't ask. He drank, put the glass down with a click, and looked for a second flaw in the evening. It arrived in the form of a busser, a 19-year-old with shoulders hunched into the shape of apologies he'd been practicing since middle school. He reached for the breadbasket. The napkin edge snagged. The knives shivered. One fell. Voss's hand moved quickly, not to catch it, but to push back from the table with a sharp scrape that made the room hear his impatience. "Do you hire people who can't count to 10? He asked Troy, who had arrived quickly enough to suggest proximity and motive. "Because that looked like math, and I saw it fail." The busser's mouth opened, then closed. Iris found the knife, retrieved it in one smooth motion, and laid it on the side station. "I'll reset your place, sir," she said, already doing so. "Would you like still or sparkling water while you wait for your main?" "I'd like competence," Voss said. "Send me someone who speaks table." "Then you have the right person," Iris replied, gaze level, tone neutral. She felt Troy's eyes on her cheek like a heat lamp. She neither flushed nor chilled. The trick with men like this was to treat them like weather. Prepare, do not worship, and keep the exits clear. At 8:06 p.m., the ribeye went to the pass. It gleamed in the bright kitchen lights, a bronze guitar under a white spotlight. Chef James, who ran his kitchen with the calm precision of an air traffic controller, lifted the edge with his tongs, peered, and set it down with a sigh. "Medium well," he said to no one and everyone. "If a cow had to die, the least we can do is not make it twice." "It's for 15, a line cook said. "The Billionaire." "Ah," James replied. "In that case, we'll send it with our blessings and a moment of silence." Iris slid the plate onto her tray, added a ramekin of sauce the color of bourbon at dusk, and walked into the dining room's warmer air. The restaurant's lighting made a religion of flattery. Everything gleamed a little better than it deserved. Voss leaned back, arms draped on the chair, like he was practicing a portrait. "Your ribeye," she said, setting it down with a steady hand. "Sauce on the side, as requested." He cut into the meat. A bead of juice ran, and then stopped, as if reconsidering. His face made a decision and told his eyebrows. "Overcooked." "It's medium well," she said. "Overcooked," he repeated, lifting a forkful as if cross-examining it. "Tell the chef that when a man like me asks for something, he expects execution." "Most men do," Iris said lightly, and the assistant on the left choked on a laugh he did not allow out. "Would you like me to have it refired?" "I would like not to have to ask twice," he said. "Of course." She lifted the plate without letting the sauce tremble, pivoted smoothly, and took 3 steps before Troy materialized again. "Refire on a 15? Troy whispered, incredulous. "He'll destroy us out there." "Only if we help," Iris said. "James will give it a quick kiss and send it back. You can comp dessert and act like it's philanthropy." "We're not comping anything until I see the total," Troy replied. His eyes cut to her apron pocket in a glance so quick it could only mean he was trying not to glance. "And keep your keys inside." Iris touched the ribbon unconsciously, drew the key deeper into the pocket. It had been polished so often, its scars looked intentional. She had found it years ago in a place that didn't get new things. The red ribbon was not sentimental, so much as readable from a distance if it fell. In the kitchen, Chef James listened to the refire request and nodded once. 2 minutes, he said. He can pretend to taste the difference. "What about the 15? A line cook asked. "If you're asking about morality," James said, "I keep mine in the walk-in with the parsley. It's cold, but it's fresh." As Iris slid the plate back to the pass, the extra stub of paper she'd tucked beneath the POS drifted loose, as if the restaurant had decided to return to the subject. She caught it before it fell into the aperture between the station and the stainless steel prep table, a place where papers disappeared to become ghosts. Kestrel Solons. LLC watched her from the ink like a name tag pinned at the wrong event. Miniature reveal number 1 arrived without fanfare. The number printed after the LLC, 98-217, was not an invoice number. It was a routing suffix used by a specific payment processor in the city. She had seen it once before on the back of a napkin in a different restaurant that had closed with more debt than chairs. She slid the stub into a flat plastic sleeve in her apron behind the ribboned key. It touched the metal and made a quiet sound, like the beginning of a plan. Back at 15, Voss accepted the quickly refired steak with the graciousness of a man who knows he is being watched and prefers that the records show magnanimity. He cut, chewed, nodded, as if in conversation with himself. "Better," he allowed. "Now, who handles your private room buyouts?" "Troy," Iris said. "He has the calendar." "Send him." Voss dabbed at his mouth with a napkin, as if it had offended him by being cotton. Troy arrived at a small jog that aspired to be a stroll. Voss asked for prices, and then asked for different prices. He inquired about minimums, and then about exceptions. He explained in the tone of explanation that carries invoices hidden inside that he could bring a certain kind of crowd, a certain kind of attention, the kind that made other restaurants send flowers across town the next morning. "We're always excited to host leaders in the community," Troy said, using the word leaders in the way people use weather when they mean storms. "We can probably do 30% off the package if you—" "50," Voss said, smiling in a way that displayed a predator's leisure. Troy's mouth made a round shape that might have been called admiration on a brighter day. "Let me check with the owner." "Do that," Voss said, "and tell him that if he says no, he'll spend the next month explaining to people why I'm at another place that says yes." Troy retreated with a nod that looked like a bow that got lost. Iris filled water for table 7, which had ordered fish and the kind of conversation that stays married. As she steadied the carafe, the woman at 7 said, not unkindly, "Honey, are you okay?" "I'm working," Iris said, placing the glass down gently. The woman's eyes drifted to the red ribbon in Iris's apron and back again with a curiosity that didn't need feeding. The man at 7 cleared his throat, and the conversation resumed its gentle, married pace. At 8:33 p.m., the kitchen printer misfired again. This time, the extra text knitted itself to the bottom of the dessert course like a hem trying to hide. Card Search G 3.0%, Kestrel Solns LLC. Iris tore it free, glanced at the digits, and felt a small satisfaction unspool. Miniature reveal number 2. The card surcharge that wasn't supposed to exist had existed for at least 3 weeks, likely longer. The processor fee showed up only when a ticket pushed past a certain threshold, a threshold the restaurant rarely crossed unless a table ordered the good wine or purchased a private room. It was not illegal to pass along fees. It was illegal to hide them. It was always unethical to hide them where the staff bore the tip outcomes of the hiding. She watched Voss's assistants check their phones under the table like synchronizing watches. The one on the left sent an email. She clocked the subject line. Term sheet. Draft V7. The one on the right opened a spreadsheet with columns that had the glazed look of numbers that have learned to lie politely. Voss finished his steak, allowed his plate to be removed, as if he were granting parole, and asked for coffee. "Black," he said, then added, "and make it good," as if he were protecting his reputation from mediocrity 1 cup at a time. The espresso machine hissed, sighed, and then offered a shot with crema, like a promised sunrise. Iris delivered it, and caught the smallest thing, the catalyst that is never a fanfare, but a whisper. As Voss lifted the demitasse, the sleeve of his suit jacket slid back just enough to reveal the edge of a wristband not made for boardrooms. Fabric, woven, medical. The kind hospitals attach that don't come off without scissors. Miniature reveal number 3 was not a conclusion, but a question that leaned forward. Voss had left a hospital, either today or yesterday. The band number, HN 5472, was visible for only a breath, but Iris had always been good with numbers. She wrote it on the inside of her mind, next to the processor suffix, and the color of the espresso's crema, and her own pulse. He saw her seeing, and covered the band with a slow grace that suggested calculation rather than vulnerability. Then he smiled, a small thing that could be mistaken for kindness at a distance. "Do I know you?" he asked. "Tonight you do," she said, and left before the moment could grow teeth. By 8:51 p.m., a kind of equilibrium had returned to the room. The couple at 7 were debating whether the fish had been a touch too forward with the fennel. The foretop at 10 had achieved the fragile joy of a shared joke. Table 3 had folded their bill into a paper plane of guilt and gratitude. Troy approached Iris with the posture of a man delivering a victory and a warning. "We're closing him at 40% off the buyout with a bar minimum," he said, a half wink playing at one eye like a muscle twitch. "And we're adding an admin fee. Don't make a face. It's standard. Kestrel takes their bite. We take ours." "Do I see that on my paycheck, or only in my conscience?" Iris asked. "Conscience is for people who can afford it," Troy replied, and moved toward the bar where the bartender had polished a row of glasses into small mirrors of his own uncertainty. The check for 15 printed at 9:04 p.m. It was a geography lesson in dollars. The steak, the wine, the espresso, the surcharge, no one admitted to, the admin fee, everyone apologized for, only after it couldn't be removed. Iris folded it once, laid it on a small brown tray that had carried bills for a decade without keeping any, and set it at Voss's right hand. He looked at the total the way a hunter looks at a field, estimating, appreciating, assessing prey and path. Then he produced a fountain pen, the deep green of old money, and underlined the tip line with theatrical precision. The pen bled a dot at the corner of the page. The dot spread like a quiet rumor. He wrote a figure that would be generous if it belonged to someone else, signed with a flourish, and left the pen uncapped on the tablecloth, the way some men leave their intentions. "Good," he said to Troy, who had returned the moment the pen appeared, as if summoned by ink. "Now, tell your owner he can do better than this room. I'll be in touch." "We'd be honored," Troy said. "We can offer—" "Stop offering," Voss said, standing. "Start doing." He turned without waiting for the response he had made irrelevant and walked toward the door, assistants falling into step. The room watched, the way rooms do when they're deciding whether to applaud or complain on the way home. The revolving door embraced him, returned him to the night, chewed and smoothed the assistants, and then resumed its quiet circles. The check lay open. Iris lifted it, and the ink blot from the green pen had grown by the time it reached the POS station. She slid the bill into the slot, and the drawer responded with the obedient hydraulic sigh of machines that have outlived better jobs. She logged the tip, felt the numbers slide into place like tiles in a patience game, and then placed a copy of the receipt in the manager's file. Beneath the clipped stack, a memo peeked out, an email printed by someone who trusted paper more than cloud. Mandatory admin, fee, language, effective. Jan 1. The bullet points were a study in plausible deniability. The last line read, "If asked, say it offsets rising costs. Do not mention Kestrel." Miniature reveal number 4 wrote itself. This wasn't an accident. It was policy. At 9:17 p.m., the kitchen began its ritual of undoing. Knives were washed and set to dry like soldiers too tired to stand. The burners exhaled and went invisible. The dining room thinned, then cleared, then pretended it had never been crowded. Iris collected her things. A pen, a small notepad with the corners worn to softness, the flat plastic sleeve with the extra stubs, the ribboned key. Troy hovered. "Don't tell me you're mad about the fee," he said, as if they had been having this conversation all evening. "You made good money tonight." "I made what he wanted to spend," Iris said, "and what the system wanted to skim." "The system," he echoed with a smile that suggested the word went down like a dry cracker. "This is a restaurant, not a civics class. It's a place where the best thing we make is trust," she said, and the truth of it hung there for a second before the air took its temperature. "I've worked in rooms where the steak was better and the numbers were worse." Troy shrugged. "Every room has its way. If it bothers you, there are other rooms." He checked his watch, a cheap one designed to look expensive, and turned away. "We open at 5 tomorrow. Don't be late." Iris watched him walk, then tucked the plastic sleeve deeper into her bag. She tied the ribbon tighter around the key, slid it into the inner pocket that lay against her ribs, and stepped out into the kind of winter night that wakes you without your consent. The city breathed cold and steam. A bus exhaled at the corner. A man in a blue knit cap sold paper cups of coffee from a cart that had outlasted 3 mayors. She paused under the awning and let the sounds file themselves. A siren far off. A laugh too loud. The metallic slap of a subway grate giving back heat. Then she pulled out her phone and typed a message she had drafted a dozen times and never sent. 8:23 p.m. Kestrel Solutions, LLC plus Service Gateway appears on floor tickets over $400. Routing suffix 98 to went and seen. Admin fee memo instructs staff to obscure. 9:04 p.m. Voss here. Hospital wristband, HN 5472. Assistants shared term sheet draft V7. The reply came before the steam from the bus had dissolved. A number without a name, because sometimes names get in the way of work. Received. Document quietly. No confrontations. You're not ready to move yet. She stared at the last sentence. It pressed on a bruise. You're not ready to move yet. The words were correct. They were also why she had chosen them as a challenge when she took the job 6 weeks ago. Plenty of people walked into rooms like this one and took what the room gave. She had walked in with a key and the patience to find the lock. She typed back, "Copy. We'll continue." And then, after a moment, "Any updates on escrow?" The 3 dots of consideration appeared, blinked, went still, returned. Escrow funded at 51%. Waiting on final valuation. You'll have to see the books. She looked up at the dark windows on the 2nd floor, where the small office with a crooked framed photo of a ribbon cutting pretended to be the brain of the place. She pictured the books, not the electronic ones you could backspace into compliance, but the binders with coffee rings and post-its that told the truth no one uploads. She pictured the memo in Troy's file, the extra inches of paper, the green dot of ink. A door to her left opened. Chef James stepped out, shrugging into a coat that made him look less like a conductor and more like a man who has learned to expect weather. He saw her, paused. "You okay?" he asked, not because he expected drama, but because endurance can look like calm until it doesn't. "I'm working," she said. and the answer satisfied him. "You have a good deadpan," he offered. "It's a skill in this town." "It keeps the lights on," she replied. He glanced at the key ribbon where it made a small red comma at her pocket's edge. "Old?" "Older than the rent," she said. He nodded as if she'd given him the right password and headed toward the subway. She watched the back of his coat until it became someone else's. At 9:31 p.m., she set off toward home, boots tapping out a tempo her grandmother would have called a blessed march. The wind went at her face with vigor. She passed a newsstand that sold headlines like souvenirs. A child leaned against a doorframe and hummed a tune Iris knew only because her mother had sung it when bills came in pairs and groceries came with coupons. On the far corner, a man argued with his phone about whether a rideshare could find him if he didn't want to be found. Half a block later, she stopped outside a bank with lion heads over the door and pretended to study the marble, the way tourists pretend to be lost while finding exactly what they came for. The ATM vestibule light put a rectangular glow on the sidewalk. She checked the reflection in the glass, not vanity, but habit, and pushed in. The air smelled like disinfectant and cardboard. She approached the safe deposit box counter, which was closed to people who believed hours were for everyone. Iris did not knock. She didn't need the box tonight. The key in her pocket warmed against her palm anyway, as if reminding her that locks are not just metal. They are timing. On the walk back, her phone buzzed. Another message from the number without a name. Reminder: if you find misuse, you will need the paper trail. Photos acceptable. Originals better. Be patient. The buy only works if the story holds. She typed, "Understood," then added, "Story's already telling itself." When she reached her building, the lobby smelled like someone had tried to cover old paint with new lemons. The elevator coughed and lurched with the dignity of an aging boxer. In her apartment, a modest one-bedroom on the 3rd floor with a view of the brick wall that had supported 100 urban romances from the wrong side, she fed the radiator a twist, lit the single good lamp, and spread the plastic sleeve on the table. The 2 stubs looked smaller at home, like fish out of the river that had seemed large when the current ran. She photographed them, left them in the sleeve, and wrote down the details she would not trust to stay sharp after sleep. Times, numbers, faces, the rhythm of Voss's voice when he said competence as if it always belonged to someone else. She opened her laptop. The file she needed sat inside a folder named like something no one would open. Inside, documents aligned themselves with the modest dignity of people waiting for fair treatment. Escrow agreements, valuation notes, a preliminary capital stack she never read after midnight, because numbers that late behave like dreams. At the bottom, the letter that had started the patience. It was short, blunt, verbal lie poured over old grease. To the current ownership, we are prepared to assume liabilities and invest in compliance that aligns with city and state law. You have used a processor that obscures fees and misallocates tips. You will allow diligence. If you refuse, we will report. It wasn't a threat. It was instructions for how to stop lying to yourself while the house still stood. She read it once, not for content, but for posture, and closed the laptop. The other key in her life, the one that opened her grandmother's cedar chest 2 states away, would have to wait for a spring she hadn't earned yet. The key in her apron would not. At 10:13 p.m., came across town, in an apartment that sat in a building that once sold itself as luxury and now sold itself as history. A man in a charcoal suit removed a medical wristband with a pair of gold scissors and dropped it into a trash can the color of good intentions. He watched it lie there for a second, as if it might explain itself. Then he turned off the kitchen light he rarely used and stood in the dark, making calculations that betrayed an uncommon awareness that a person could run out of tomorrows faster than out of money. If he had been the kind of man who prayed, he might have asked for competence. If he had been the kind of man who believed in omens, he might have considered a waitress and a ribboned key. The city did not slow to accommodate his considerations. Buses ran. Someone laughed with a sound that made the night warmer. Someone else washed a floor that would be dirty again by morning. He went to bed with his phone on his chest, like an argument he intended to win. In the morning, not tomorrow in the story, but the morning that would arrive whether the story wanted it or not, Iris would return to the room and let it tell her where the lock was. For now, she set the key on the table. Ribbon spiraled like a red question mark, and allowed herself one sensation the restaurant did not afford: the unguarded luxury of feeling the difference between fear and readiness. Behind her eyelids, numbers aligned like stars you don't need to name to navigate by. The promise the night had made without words arranged itself too. And if promises could be mapped, this one traced a clean line from a processor fee to a set of books to a set of signatures that would change the name on a deed. It would take patience, evidence, and a moment when the room was full and everyone thought the story was headed elsewhere. It would take competence. She smiled, small and private, and let the city finish its sentence without her. The restaurant at night had a habit of keeping secrets until the morning shift accidentally swept them into the open. Receipts curled under heat lamps, wine corks rolled beneath booths, and conversations lingered like smoke in corners no broom could reach. By the time Iris stepped back through the revolving door at 4:52 p.m. the following evening, the air already held a faint charge, as if anticipating that the night would not be like others. The hostess stand wore fresh carnations, a perfunctory apology to itself for yesterday's chaos. Troy was already pacing near the bar, tie loosened, eyes darting at the reservation ledger, as if he could force a better name onto the page through sheer managerial glare. "Good, you're early," he said when he saw Iris. His tone carried that brand of approval which never included respect. "Owner's son is coming in tonight. Don't make a scene." "Wouldn't dream of it," Iris replied, tying her apron with a practiced tug. "Also," Troy added, lowering his voice like a conspirator in a bad play, "Mr. Voss is booked again. Private alcove. He liked the steak enough to give us another shot. That means tonight is about impressing, not opinions." She gave him a blank stare, so refined it could have been plated and sold. "Understood." The private alcove half, hidden behind frosted glass and velvet curtains, was technically reserved for anniversaries and corporate deals too loud for the main floor. Tonight, it would belong to Graham Voss again, because men like him considered repetition less a habit and more a right. By 6:15 p.m., the room had settled into its nightly rhythm. Knives tapping porcelain, laughter carefully measured, bartenders shaking cocktails with the precision of metronomes. Iris floated between tables, efficient, invisible in the way only the observant learn to be. At 6:42, Voss arrived. This time without assistance, just a phone he held like an accomplice. His coat, black cashmere, swept the floor behind him like punctuation. The hostess smiled too brightly. He didn't notice. He went straight to the alcove. Iris followed with menus she knew he wouldn't read. "Back so soon," she said, tone perfectly neutral. "Good service is rare," he answered, not looking at her. "I reward what I value." He placed his phone on the table, face down, as if daring it to betray him. Iris saw the reflection in the polished surface, a notification preview, flashing briefly before the device dimmed again. She caught a fragment. Kestrel, compliance draft. She didn't react, but her chest tightened. The processor company again. Not an accident. She returned with water. As she poured, she let her eyes rest briefly on his wrist. No band tonight. The hospital bracelet was gone. In its place, a faint red line where the plastic had pressed too long. Proof, not absence. Voss ordered brusquely. "Another ribeye. This time rare. Prove the kitchen can do something right." "I'll let Chef know," she said, writing nothing down. He studied her then, longer than before. "You have a talent for staying still," he remarked. "Most people fidget when I talk." "It's a quiet job," she replied. "No," he corrected, leaning forward slightly. "It's a dangerous one. Quiet people always see more than they should." She met his eyes without blinking. Maybe some things want to be seen. The corner of his mouth twitched. Not quite a smile. Not quite a threat. Back at the service station, Iris tapped her phone under the counter. A quick photo of the reservation ledger, time-stamped with Voss's booking, joined her growing file. Each detail built scaffolding. His presence here 2 nights in a row, the memo about surcharges, the receipts with routing suffixes. Evidence, patient, and cumulative. Chef James plated the rare ribeye with a wry shake of his head. Either he's testing us, or he doesn't know what he wants. "Both can be true," Iris answered, sliding the plate onto her tray. When she returned, Voss was scrolling through his phone. He turned the screen just enough that she caught another preview before he blacked it out again. Wire transfer. Escrow pending. She placed the steak before him and waited. He cut, chewed, nodded once. Better. Almost edible. "Good to hear," she said. He took a sip of wine and then, with casual cruelty, asked, "Tell me something. Do you ever think about what it's like to own a place like this, rather than serve in it?" The question hung like a trap. "Places like this own themselves," she replied carefully. "We just keep the lights on." He laughed, low and sharp. "That's why people like me exist. To buy what others can't imagine." Her expression didn't shift, but her fingers tightened around the tray edge until the wood left a faint impression in her palm. At 7:30 p.m., the owner's son arrived, a man named Patrick, who wore wealth the way others wear sunscreen. Thick, obvious, designed to shield. Troy fluttered around him like a moth around a neon bulb. Patrick barely acknowledged him. His gaze swept the room with the distracted boredom of someone who had inherited not just money, but immunity from consequence. He passed Iris, gave her a glance that lingered half a second too long, and sat at the bar. "Scotch," he said. "The good one." The bartender hesitated, unsure which bottle qualified as good. Iris stepped in. "He means the Macallan, 25. Patrick smirked. "Smart girl." The word girl scraped, but she let it pass. From the alcove, Voss's voice rose. "Patrick," he called without standing. "Come here." The owner's son obliged, drink in hand. He slipped behind the velvet curtain, leaving Troy stranded outside like a guard who'd lost his post. Iris, clearing a nearby table, angled her body just enough to catch the cadence of their voices. "Terms are clear," Voss said. "Escrow is funded. Your father delays. We lose momentum." Patrick chuckled. "My father's sentimental about the place. I'm not. He'll sign if I tell him to." "Then tell him," Voss replied. "Kestrel can wash the fees clean once we finalize. No one will know where the margin comes from." Margin, fees, escrow. Iris gripped a glass a fraction tighter. Miniature reveal number 5 had just walked out into the open. The restaurant itself was being prepared for sale to Voss through the same processor, quietly siphoning percentages from the staff's livelihoods. At 8:02 p.m., Patrick emerged, face flushed from drink and self-satisfaction. He clapped Troy on the shoulder with the easy cruelty of someone patting a dog. "Good things coming," he said vaguely, then left without finishing his scotch. Voss lingered another half hour, finishing his wine, making notes on his phone. He tipped less generously tonight, as if reminding the room that gratitude was optional. When he left, the silence he carried with him felt heavier than the sound of his presence. After closing, the staff gathered briefly near the bar, counting tips, stacking chairs. Troy announced, "Owner's son says we'll have upgrades soon. Better events, bigger names. That means more money for everyone." "Or more fees," Iris muttered under her breath. Troy shot her a look. "Careful. Not everyone appreciates cynicism." She didn't answer. She slipped out into the night, bag heavy with 2 new receipts, phone heavier with the photo of the ledger. The city's cold cut sharper tonight. She walked faster, as if movement could keep suspicion from catching up. At home, she laid the evidence on her table again. This time, the sleeve held not 2, but 4 slips, each bearing Kestrel's quiet confession. She arranged them like puzzle pieces, photographing them in sequence. Then she opened her laptop and added notes. Voss present 2 nights. Escrow confirmed in message preview. Patrick complicit. Admission, father's signature. Fees tied to Kestrel Solutions, LLC. She saved the file under another innocuous name, Tax Forms 2017, and encrypted it. Then she reached for the ribboned key, turned it over in her hand. It wasn't just a symbol. It was access. Tomorrow, she would use it. The office upstairs, with its crooked photo and dusty binders, wasn't beyond reach. The story was no longer just whispering. It was clearing its throat. The 3rd night began with rain. Not the clean kind that washed away grime, but the heavy, greasy drizzle New York specializes in, the kind that paints sidewalks with the shine of oil and regret. Iris pulled her hood low, cut across the avenue, and stepped into the restaurant 5 minutes before her shift. Her shoes carried the damp, but her mind was already dry, sharpened into something like resolve. The ribboned key pressed against her ribs as she clocked in. It had grown heavier over the past 24 hours, not in weight, but in consequence. Inside, the restaurant felt tense. The air was warmer than usual, the lights slightly dimmer. as if the building itself were trying to make a secret of what was about to happen. Staff moved quicker, whispers tighter. Troy was on edge, his shirt collar spotted with sweat despite the cool draft near the door. "What's wrong?" Iris asked, tone bland. He rubbed his jaw. "Audit tomorrow. Owners want the books clean, which means tonight everyone pretends to be perfect." "Perfect?" Iris echoed, knowing the word could mean the opposite. By 6:20 p.m., and the floor filled with the regular collage of diners, businessmen with voices like knives, couples smoothing over fractures with wine, tourists staring at menus like maps written in another language. Iris worked silently, each movement deliberate, but her eyes kept drifting toward the staircase behind the bar. It led to the upstairs office, the crooked photo of the ribbon cutting hung there. She had seen it a dozen times when Troy fetched extra ledgers or barked orders down the steps. The office was small, glass-paned, lit with a jaundiced bulb that revealed more dust than it chased away. That was where the truth slept, poorly hidden behind manila folders and receipts stapled with lies. She would need timing, cover, and patience. Tonight could give her all three. At 7:03 p.m., Graham Voss returned. This time, he didn't announce himself. He walked in like he already owned the place. His coat glistened with rain, his smile with self-certainty. He headed straight for the alcove, ignoring the hostess entirely. Iris greeted him with water. "Back again," she said, deadpan. "I find the company amusing," he replied, "and the steak tolerable." He placed his phone on the table, face down as usual, but the vibration against wood betrayed a constant stream of incoming messages. Each buzz was a pulse of the machine he belonged to. She poured his wine. He sipped, nodded once. Then, with that same unsettling calm, he asked, "Have you thought more about what I said last night? About owning instead of serving?" She smiled faintly, controlled. "I think some people confuse owning with belonging." That made him pause. His eyes narrowed slightly, then softened into something like interest. "You're wasted here." "So I've been told," she replied, then turned away before he could sharpen the observation into a weapon. The catalyst came at 7:40 p.m. A delivery man arrived at the side door, arms loaded with boxes. It wasn't unusual. Restaurants breathe deliveries, but these boxes were marked not with food suppliers, but with the emblem of Kestrel Solutions LLC. Iris caught the logo as the door swung shut. She moved quickly, intercepting Troy as he signed for the packages. "I thought audits meant no surprises," she said casually. He stiffened. "Supplies," he snapped. "Paperwork, terminals, whatever." He shoved the clipboard into the delivery man's hands, eyes daring her to ask again. Miniature reveal number 6. Kestrel wasn't just processing payments. It was physically inside the restaurant. By 8:10 p.m., the floor hummed with the practiced symphony of fine dining. But Iris's attention lived upstairs. She waited for the moment. When Troy disappeared into the kitchen to shout. When Chef James barked for help plating. When Voss was distracted by a phone call. At 8:27, it came. The kitchen erupted over a missing garnish. Troy stormed to mediate. And Voss's phone rang with a number that made him step outside the alcove to take it. Iris slipped toward the staircase. Her pulse quickened with each step. The ribboned key pressed like a brand against her chest. At the office door, she slid it into the lock. The metal turned with a quiet click, like a sigh of recognition. Inside, the air smelled of dust, ink, and faint mildew. The desk sagged under ledgers, receipts, and a clunky desktop computer whose screen glowed weakly. She moved quickly, eyes scanning. Invoices, surcharge breakdowns, memos stamped with Kestrel's logo. One binder, thicker than the rest, carried the title, Escrow Transition. She opened it. Inside, draft contracts naming Graham Voss as primary acquirer. Signatures, Patrick's scrawl at the bottom of several pages. Terms, staff adjustments, fee reallocations, compliance language as hollow as a broken shell. She snapped photos rapidly, angling the pages under the jaundiced light. Each click of the shutter was another nail for the coffin. Then she saw it. A printed spreadsheet labeled Staff Tip Allocations. Adjusted. The numbers punched her gut. Percentages skimmed, rounded down, diverted through Kestrel's shell accounts. Waiters losing 3 to 5% of nightly tips. Bartenders shaved even more. Over months, it meant thousands stolen silently. Her throat tightened, but her face stayed calm. She took the photo. Footsteps echoed on the stairs. Iris shoved the binder shut, slid it back, pocketed her phone. She adjusted her apron, smoothed her hair, and stepped out of the office as if she had simply been fetching cleaning supplies. At the landing, she nearly collided with Patrick himself. His cologne was sharp, his smirk sharper. "What are you doing up here?" he asked. "Looking for extra menus," she said smoothly, holding up a random folder. Hostess ran short. He narrowed his eyes, suspicion simmering. Then he smirked again. "You're smarter than the others." "Careful? Smart can be dangerous." "Only if someone notices," she replied, and brushed past him, pulse steady, despite the fire in her chest. Back on the floor, Voss had returned to his alcove, still on the phone. His tone was clipped, impatient, full of veiled threats disguised as business. Iris poured coffee for table 12, hands steady, mind racing. She had enough now photos of contracts, ledgers, allocations. Proof not just of corruption, but intent. Yet patience was still required. The buyout wasn't complete. If she moved too early, Voss would spin the narrative. Patrick would deny. Kestrel would vanish into paperwork. She needed one more thing. A direct link tying Voss personally to the stolen percentages. At 9:15, the night reached its false calm. Diners paid, laughed, left. Chairs scraped. The air smelled of citrus polish and fatigue. Voss lingered, swirling his last glass of wine. He beckoned Iris. "You," he said. "You've been watching me." "Observing," she corrected. "Same thing." He leaned forward. "Tell me, what do you think I'm doing here?" She tilted her head. "Buying dinner." He chuckled. "No, I'm buying the future. This place is a shell. I'll turn it into something real, something profitable." "And the people?" she asked quietly. "They'll adjust," he said, "or they'll leave. Money doesn't wait for feelings." There it was, the philosophy behind the theft, spoken in his own voice. She didn't need him to sign it. She only needed to remember. He finished his wine, left without ceremony, and vanished into the rain. After close, Iris lingered in the dining room. Staff drifted out, Troy locking tills with false satisfaction. The staircase loomed behind her like a promise. She touched the ribboned key once more, then turned toward the door. The night outside felt different. The rain had stopped. The city gleamed with wet light, streets shining like mirrors. She texted the number without a name. Escrow contracts secured. Staff skimming confirmed. Photos attached. Voss personally implicated. What's next? The reply came minutes later. Hold steady. The buy is almost ready. Tomorrow, you'll walk in as staff. Soon, you'll walk out as owner. She closed her phone, heart steady now. The story was no longer whispering, no longer clearing its throat. It was speaking. And tomorrow, the city would hear it. The fourth night was electric before it even began. The city buzzed with Friday impatience, and the restaurant mirrored it. Bar clattering with early cocktails, the hum of too loud laughter, Troy barking orders with a desperation that smelled faintly of fear. The audit was in the morning, but everyone knew tonight was the true test. Iris arrived at 4:47, earlier than usual. The ribboned key lay heavy in her pocket, a talisman and a weapon. She had enough evidence to unravel the game, but timing still mattered. To take the restaurant, she needed the story to break open in front of the right witnesses. At 6:15 p.m., Voss arrived, not with assistants this time, but with a small entourage of investors. 4 men in tailored suits and a woman with diamond earrings sharp enough to cut glass. They claimed the alcove like conquerors. Patrick was already waiting, sipping whiskey too quickly, trying too hard to look like the heir of something worth inheriting. His laugh was brittle, cracking between boasts about renovations and expansion plans. Iris slipped into their orbit with practiced calm, delivering menus, pouring water, setting wine. She might as well have been invisible until she spoke. "Would you like to hear tonight's specials?" she asked. "No need," Voss said, dismissive. "We're here to talk numbers, not food. Bring us the ribeyes, rare, all of them." She nodded, jotting nothing, and walked away. But her ears had caught the opening line of the conversation. "Escrow closes Monday," Voss said. "By Tuesday, the deed is ours. Kestrel will clean the margin, and no one will question the admin fee. It'll look like compliance, not theft." The investors nodded, sipping wine as if fraud were just another appetizer. In the kitchen, Iris delivered the order to Chef James. He frowned. "All rare? What is this, a carnivore convention?" She smiled faintly. "Something like that." As the steaks hissed on the grill, she slipped her phone from her pocket. Quick photos, receipts, invoices, the staff allocation sheet from last night. Then, as Chef barked for garnish, she opened her voice recorder and let it run in her apron pocket. Tonight's dinner wasn't just a meal. It was confession, disguised as conversation. At 7:04, the alcove filled with the rhythm of a deal closing. Voices low, conspiratorial. Patrick bragging about his father's willingness to sign. Voss promising returns. The investors murmuring assent. Iris poured wine, her hand steady, though her chest thundered. The recorder caught everything. Then came the mistake. One investor asked, "And the staff? Won't they notice?" Voss laughed. "Staff never notice. And if they do, they don't matter. Waitresses don't buy restaurants." The table chuckled. Even Patrick. Iris lowered the bottle slowly, as if not to spill. She said nothing. But inside, the words carved themselves into steel. By 7:45, dessert plates clattered out. The alcove reeked of cigar smoke and self-satisfaction. Patrick toasted with his half-empty glass. "To new ownership," he declared. The investors raised theirs. Voss smirked like a king. And that was when Iris moved. She stepped closer, sliding the check onto the table. But instead of retreating, she remained standing, eyes level, voice calm. "There's a mistake," she said softly. Voss blinked. "Excuse me?" "The surcharge," she explained, tapping the receipt. "The one hidden through Kestrel Solutions. 3% from every bill over 400, skimmed from tips, diverted through shell accounts. It's here, in black and white." The investors froze. Patrick paled. Voss's face darkened. "What nonsense!" "It's not nonsense," she interrupted, voice still level. She slid a stack of copied receipts from her apron, laying them on the white tablecloth like cards in a quiet game. "Here, and here, and here, each one tagged with Kestrel's routing code. And here," she placed a photo of the staff allocation sheet, "is proof the money was taken from your employees, month after month." The investors leaned forward. One frowned. Another muttered. Patrick shifted uncomfortably. Voss tried to smile. "This is illegal," Iris said simply. "Fraudulent. And recorded." She tapped her apron. "Every word tonight." The alcove went silent. Troy appeared, summoned by tension. "What's going on here?" he demanded, forcing a smile at the investors. Voss turned on him. "Control your staff." But Troy faltered. He glanced at the receipts on the table, at the investors' narrowing eyes, and his confidence cracked. "Iris," he hissed, "put that away." "No," she said, still calm. "Not this time." She reached into her pocket and drew out the ribboned key, laying it gently atop the receipts. The red ribbon curled like a flame on the white cloth. "This key," she said softly, "opens the office upstairs. The office with binders of contracts, escrow drafts, Patrick's signatures. I've photographed all of it. Escrow terms, Kestrel's involvement, staff skimming. I sent copies to council this afternoon. By tomorrow, the city will have everything." The investors exchanged glances. The woman with diamond earrings leaned back, lips pursed. "Is this true?" she asked Patrick. Patrick stammered, then went silent. Voss's face hardened. "You think anyone will believe a waitress over me?" "Yes," Iris said, voice sharp now, cutting through the alcove's stale air. "Because I don't just have my word. I have proof. Documents, audio, and legal escrow of my own." Voss blinked. "Your own?" She nodded once. 51% funded. Independent capital. And as of tonight, with the evidence in hand, the board will have no choice but to void your acquisition, which means the restaurant will need new ownership. The investors sat stunned. The woman's eyes narrowed, calculating. Then, slowly, she smiled. Voss slammed his palm against the table, rattling glasses. "You don't know who you're dealing with." "I know exactly," Iris replied. "A man who thought no one was watching. But I was." The next moments blurred. The investors demanded explanations. Patrick cursed under his breath. Troy tried and failed to smooth over panic. Voss stormed from the alcove, spitting threats. But Iris stood still, steady, ribboned key gleaming against paper evidence. The tide had turned, and everyone knew it. By 9:15, The restaurant emptied in uneasy silence. Staff whispered among themselves, eyes flicking to Iris with something new. Hope, maybe. In the office upstairs, Iris sat at the crooked desk, binders spread before her. The key fit the lock, as if it had always waited for this. She opened contracts, photographed more pages, emailed files to her counsel. Each click of the shutter was a nail in Voss's empire. At 10:02 p.m., her phone buzzed, the number without a name. Documents received. Legal injunction in motion. Acquisition frozen pending review. Prepare to assume management rights. She exhaled slowly. For the first time in weeks, her chest felt lighter. Downstairs, Troy appeared in the doorway. So, what happens now? Iris looked up, steady. Now, we prepare for reform. No more skimming, no more shell games, real compliance, fair pay. He hesitated. And me? That depends, she said. Do you want to keep working for thieves, or help rebuild? Troy swallowed hard. Rebuild, he said finally. She nodded. Then start by telling the staff the truth. Outside, the rain had stopped. The city lights shimmered on slick pavement, neon reflections bending into rivers. Voss's car sped away into the night, but his empire was already unraveling. Inside, Iris closed the binders, tied the ribbon around the key, and placed it firmly in her pocket. Tomorrow would not be another shift. Tomorrow, she would return not as a waitress, but as the new owner. The morning after the confrontation, the restaurant's glass facade reflected not just the city's skyline, but the fracture of two worlds, one ending, one beginning. A pale winter sun spilled across the sidewalk, as if the city itself wanted to witness what came next. Iris arrived early. She didn't wear her apron. The ribboned key lay in her pocket, but its weight felt different now, less like a secret, more like a crown. Inside, the staff gathered in small knots, whispering. When she stepped through the revolving door, their voices hushed. Troy stood near the bar, pale but resolute, and Chef James leaned against the counter, arms crossed, expression unreadable. You heard, Iris said simply. They nodded, some skeptical, some hopeful, but all waiting. The escrow Voss and Patrick arranged is frozen, she explained. Their contracts are void. Last night's evidence went to regulators, council, and the city. The fraud will be prosecuted, which means, she paused, scanning their faces. We're not closing. We're rebuilding. A busser, barely 19, whispered, Does that mean it's yours now? Iris exhaled. Ours. I've secured majority ownership, but this place only survives if we run it together. At 9:15 a.m., the investors returned, not with arrogance, but with caution. The woman with diamond earrings led them, her expression cool. She found Iris at the crooked desk upstairs, reviewing payroll ledgers. You made waves, the woman said. Truth tends to, Iris replied, not looking up. The investor studied her, then asked, Why buy a restaurant that nearly collapsed under fraud? Because it deserves better, Iris said. She closed the ledger and met the woman's gaze. Because the staff deserve fair pay. Because trust is worth more than margin. A long pause. Then the woman smiled faintly. You might actually make this work. We will, Iris said firmly. The woman extended a hand. Then I'll stay invested. But no kestrel, no skimming. Agreed, Iris said, shaking it. By noon, the legal notice was taped to the office door. Acquisition halted. Interim control assigned to I. Hail. The crooked, ribbon-cutting photo still hung above, but it seemed less like irony and more like foreshadowing now. The afternoon brought confrontation. Voss stormed in, face flushed with fury, lawyers in tow. Patrick trailed behind, his bravado drowned in hangover and shame. "You think you've won?" Voss snarled at Iris in the dining room, his voice carrying across empty tables. "You embarrassed me in front of investors. You think a stack of receipts and a waitress's lies can take me down?" Iris stayed calm. "They're not lies. They're documents. They're your words, recorded. And they're already with the authorities. You don't know the people I know," he spat. "No," she said evenly, "but I know the law, and I know the staff you exploited. That's enough." Patrick tried to intervene. "Look, maybe we can—" "Quiet," Voss snapped at him. "No," Iris interrupted. Her voice cut the air like glass breaking. "He won't be quiet. None of us will. Not anymore." The staff had gathered by then, drawn by the noise. Line cooks, bussers, servers, all watching. For the first time, their silence wasn't fear. It was solidarity. Voss felt it. His voice faltered. "This isn't over," he muttered, retreating toward the door. "Yes, it is," Iris said softly. "For you." And when the revolving door swallowed him, he did not return. The weeks that followed were a storm of paperwork, hearings, and reforms. Regulators confirmed Kestrel's fraud. Patrick vanished into anonymity, his family embarrassed, but unwilling to defend him publicly. Voss's empire trembled under investigation. His name, once synonymous with ruthless success, now carried the stench of scandal. Through it all, Iris remained steady. She rehired staff who had quit under unfair conditions. She ended the hidden surcharges. She sat with each employee, one by one, and asked what needed fixing. The answers filled a notebook thicker than any contract. Chef James suggested new menus. Bussers asked for transit stipends. Bartenders requested transparent tip reporting. She said yes, not because it was easy, but because it was just. The night of the reopening came 6 weeks later. The restaurant gleamed, not with opulence, but with honesty. Lights warmer, menu redesigned, prices fairer. The crooked, ribbon-cutting photo had been replaced with a new one, a candid shot of staff laughing in the kitchen. Guests filled the tables. Some had read about the scandal in the papers. Others had come out of loyalty. The air thrummed with possibility. At table 7, the same couple from that first night returned. The woman caught Iris's eye and smiled knowingly. "Feels different now," she said. "It is," Iris replied. From the bar, Troy raised a glass. Chef James nodded approvingly. Even the 19-year-old busser stood taller, as if carrying less weight. Near closing, Iris slipped into the alcove where Voss had once smirked over rare ribeye and whispered fraud. The velvet curtains still hung, but the air was lighter. She set a glass of wine on the table, not expensive, not performative. Just good. She raised it quietly to the staff, bustling in the background, to the laughter, the clinking glasses, the second chances. And then to herself. Not the waitress who had been dismissed, not the invisible observer, but the woman who had watched, waited, and turned silence into ownership. Later, when the last guest left and the lights dimmed, she untied the ribbon from the key. She placed the key in the office drawer, not hidden anymore, not heavy with secrecy. The ribbon she kept, tucking it into her notebook. A reminder that sometimes the smallest symbols open the biggest doors. The city outside kept moving horns, sirens, footsteps, but inside, faith had been restored. The staff no longer whispered about survival. They spoke about the future. The restaurant was theirs now. And as Iris locked the door behind her, the glass reflected not just her face, but the truth she had proven. Sometimes the quietest person in the room is the one who changes everything.